What is the purpose of being human? The Buddhism's answer. Life's deepest question: why do we feel empty? Have you ever felt it? Not a loud, dramatic pain, but a quiet, persistent hum. A subtle ache that comes when you least expect it. Maybe it's in the silence of your car after a long day, or as you look across a city you've worked so hard to conquer, only to feel something hollow beneath the surface. It's the strange sadness that appears even after every box has been checked. The job, the partner, the home, the goals. There's still a ghost at the feast. A feeling that something is missing, not outside, but within. Modern language might call it anxiety, burnout, or existential dread. But long before psychology gave it names, the Buddha called it dukkha. Often translated as suffering, but it's more than that. Dukkha is the underlying unease woven into the fabric of life, the sense that something is always slightly off, even in our happiest moments. And it's this quiet ache that pushes us toward the deeper question. What is all of this for? What does it mean to be human? When we seek answers, the world quickly hands us a binary choice. A choice so deeply rooted, we rarely question it. On one side, the worldly path. Build a career. Start a family. Leave a mark. Be someone of value. This feels tangible, responsible, grounded. But beneath it often hides the fear. What if I spend my whole life building, only to realize I never truly lived? On the other side, the spiritual path. Let go. Meditate. Withdraw from the noise. Seek inner stillness. This feels pure, meaningful. But it too carries a fear. What if I become detached? What if I abandon those who need me? And so we're torn. We chase success, but feel spiritually lost. We seek inner peace, but feel disconnected from life. We try to live two lives, yet feel whole in neither. But what if the conflict isn't between the two paths, but in the belief that we must choose only one? What if that entire framework is a misunderstanding? What if the purpose of being human isn't a single note, but a symphony? Two melodies, worldly and ultimate, woven together into something richer than either alone. This is the insight Buddhism offers. It doesn't ask us to reject the world or retreat from it. Instead, it invites us to see more clearly, to live fully in both dimensions, engaged in the world with compassion and care, while also waking up to the deeper truth beyond identity, ambition, and fear. And when these two purposes move in harmony, life becomes not a dilemma to solve, but a truth to embody. A path where we are no longer torn in two. A life whole, present, and free. Our everyday life, finding meaning in what we do. Let's begin with the first layer of purpose, the one that quietly shapes the surface of our daily lives. This is what we might call our worldly purpose. To see it clearly, picture a master craftsman at his workbench. Notice the way his hands move, not rushed, not distracted. There's a calm focus in every gesture. He's not thinking of praise, nor trying to chase after reward. He's simply present, honoring the wood, respecting the tools, giving himself completely to the process. At that moment, there is no audience, just the work and the quiet joy of doing it well. This, too, is you. When you rock your child back to sleep with tired eyes and a steady heart. when you choose honesty over gain, though no one is watching. When you build something useful, care for someone, or offer a small act of generosity. These are not small things. They are deep expressions of presence. In some spiritual circles, there's a tendency to look down on this level of life. Let go, they say. All of this is attachment. But that's a misunderstanding of what the Buddha truly taught. In the Sigalovada Sutta, he didn't urge a young man to abandon society or turn away from relationships. He offered practical, compassionate guidance, how to be a responsible son, a trustworthy friend, a loving partner, a just employer. He showed that the path of wisdom does not lie in rejecting the world, but in living in it with clarity and compassion. Still, a question may arise. Why invest so deeply in these things if everything will pass away? If all our efforts will one day vanish, if all we build will crumble, why bother at all? The answer lies in the Buddha's teaching on karma, intentional action. Your actions are not meaningless just because they are impermanent. Their value is not measured in how long they last, but in the energy they carry. You're not building a monument. You're planting a fragrance into the air, an invisible trace of goodness that moves through the world and touches others. As the Dhammapada says, the scent of flowers does not go against the wind, nor that of sandalwood, tagara, or jasmine. But the fragrance of the virtuous goes against the wind. The goodness of a person spreads in all directions. That is your true legacy, not the things you own or the title you carry, but the quiet force of your kindness. It's in the way you held someone's hand when they were in pain, in the decisions you made when no one would ever know. It's the ripple of trust you left behind, a force not measured by time, but by truth. Even ancient philosophers in the West understood this. The Greeks called it eudaimonia, a kind of flourishing that comes not from pleasure or success, but from living with virtue and meaning. So yes, this worldly layer of purpose is precious. It gives form to our lives. It reminds us that presence and responsibility are sacred. But it's not the whole story. Because when we pour all our identity into our roles, our work, our families, our status, we begin to cling. And what we cling to always brings suffering. We fear losing what we love. We fear change, failure, aging. There's a quiet, constant tension underneath the surface. To be devoted is noble. To be excellent in your craft is admirable. But excellence alone is not yet freedom. There is a deeper purpose still, one that begins not with building, but with letting go. Your everyday struggles, how they become your path. And so, we must go deeper. Beneath the visible layer of what we do, our jobs, our roles, our accomplishments, there lies a quieter, more fundamental layer, not just who we are, but what we think we are. This is the second, deeper layer of human purpose, the ultimate purpose. And it's here that the mind often resists. A quiet voice arises. Enlightenment, liberation. That's for monks in robes, meditating on mountaintops. I have bills to pay, children to raise, deadlines to meet. My life is too messy for any of that. But this is where Buddhism offers one of its most profound and transformative insights. It doesn't promise awakening in spite of our struggles. It reveals that awakening happens through them. Your stress, your frustration, your heartbreak, these are not interruptions to your spiritual path. They are the path. They are not barriers to wisdom. They are the raw, burning material from which wisdom is formed. That sharp irritation in traffic, or the tension in a difficult meeting. It's not a personal failure. It's a moment of practice. It's a mirror reflecting the truth of impermanence, of expectation, of craving. That anxious tightness about the future. It's not just stress to manage. It's a direct teaching about the nature of uncertainty, and a chance to find stability in something deeper than control. And that heartbreak, the one that cracked you open, that's the moment where the illusion of the solid, armored self begins to give way. Pain becomes the doorway. This is not poetic optimism. It is grounded in one of the most central teachings of the Buddha: dependent origination, paticca-samuppada. Nothing, not even our emotions, stands alone. Anger arises because of conditions. So does fear. So does sorrow. And when those conditions shift, the emotions fade. They are not who we are. They are passing weather. By learning to observe this process directly, we stop being victims of our feelings. We become witnesses, present, clear, alive. Viktor Frankl once said that human beings can find meaning even in the midst of great suffering. Buddhism goes further. It teaches that suffering itself can become the very material of awakening. Not something to escape, not something to endure until peace returns, but something to be understood deeply, until its nature reveals itself as empty, conditioned, and impermanent. And that brings us to a critical question. What then is liberation? What is this so-called ultimate purpose? It is not just healing. It is not the calming of the mind so we can function better in the world. Liberation, as taught in the Four Noble Truths, is nirodha, the complete, remainderless cessation of craving, the extinguishing of the internal fire that fuels our suffering. It is not about fixing the self. It is about seeing that the self we cling to, this fixed, unchanging identity, is an illusion to begin with. This is the truth of anatta, non-self. In this freedom, the fever doesn't just subside, it vanishes at the root. And when the fever ends, there is not a you who is healed. There is only the absence of suffering. And in that absence, there is a vastness, a stillness that is not empty, but profoundly full. That is the freedom the Buddha pointed to, not reserved for monks, not confined to temples, but available here, now, in the very heart of your most human moments. Living the whole life, when every moment becomes your practice. What happens when the surface and the depth of our being are no longer in conflict? When we no longer live as two divided selves, one navigating the world, the other seeking truth, but as one whole, undivided presence? This is not a dramatic transformation with fireworks of enlightenment. It is quiet, grounded, and deeply human. This integrated life does not arise from effortful striving. It is not the result of trying to become spiritual, moral, or wise. On the contrary, it emerges only when the illusion of a separate self softens. When the one who clings, resists, and controls begins to dissolve. What follows is a natural unfolding. Wisdom, panya, and compassion, karuna, arise not as ideals, but as effortless responses to life. Such a person does not withdraw from the world. They still act, speak, build, care. But their actions are no longer rooted in fear or identity. They may be a teacher, a parent, a gardener, a nurse, but they no longer confuse the role with the self. They give themselves completely to the moment at hand, and yet they are free, because they know that nothing can truly be held. Like someone building a sandcastle with full attention and love, they are not saddened when the tide comes. The beauty was in the making, not the possession. And what remains of them when they are gone? In a world shaped by impermanence, anicca, what legacy can truly endure? Not one of fame or form, for all such things fade. The real legacy is subtler, a ripple in the stream of consciousness. Through their mindful presence, their quiet generosity, their steady clarity, they touch others, sometimes without knowing it. That influence spreads through the web of dependent origination, not in their name, but as part of the Dharma moving silently through the world. This is not a distant ideal. It is already available. It doesn't require you to retreat from society or become someone else. It begins in small, ordinary moments, the kind you often overlook. When you wash the dishes and truly wash the dishes, feeling the warmth of the water, seeing the shimmer of the soap, hearing the clink of porcelain, that is the path. When you listen to someone without rushing to respond or filter their words through your opinions, you are already practicing. When your mind is no longer scattered across past regrets or future plans, but rests fully in the act of living, you are meditating, not with effort, but with natural attention. Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh called this the miracle of mindfulness. Not because it is rare, but because it transforms the ordinary into the sacred. Your home, your desk, your daily walk, they are not distractions from practice. They are the practice. Each moment is an invitation to live from wholeness, not fragmentation. Each moment is both the path and the arrival. The invitation, from seeking purpose to becoming it. We've now journeyed through two profound layers of being human: the responsibilities we carry in this world, and the deeper freedom that comes from recognizing our true nature. At first, they may seem like opposites: duty and liberation, form and emptiness. But they are not in conflict. One is the role, the other is the awareness that gives the role meaning. One is the stage, the other is the understanding of the entire play. The deeper truth is this: we are not asked to choose between the two. The invitation of a human life is to live both fully, with clarity and integrity. To be the dedicated craftsman who also knows the clay is impermanent. To be a parent, a teacher, a worker, a friend, wholeheartedly. And at the same time to remember that these roles are not who we are, but expressions of something vaster moving through us. And when this insight dawns, something quiet and life-changing begins to happen. We stop asking the anxious, outward-facing question that began this journey. What is my purpose? That question always points away from this moment. It sends us searching for a role, a mission, a label, something to justify our existence. It makes us feel like purpose is something we must chase, something we do not yet have. But when we come home to ourselves, a much gentler, wiser question arises. One that doesn't look out into the future, but into the now. In this moment, in this exact situation, how can I act with awareness, with responsibility, and with kindness? This question doesn't promise status or success, but it brings something far deeper: presence. And as you live from that place, one moment, one breath at a time, the desperate search for a grand external purpose begins to dissolve. Not because you've given up, but because you've seen through the illusion that you were ever separate from it. Purpose is not something you find at the end of a long journey. Purpose is what you become when you are fully awake in your life. You don't become it by building a greater version of yourself, by polishing an identity, or by chasing an ideal. You become it by letting go. Letting go of the idea that you are incomplete. Letting go of the belief that you must prove something to the world. And in that letting go, a great stillness opens. A spaciousness in which your life, just as it is, begins to sing. Not louder, but truer. Not more perfect, but more real. And that, quietly and without fanfare, is where your deepest purpose begins to bloom. You are no longer seeking it, you are living it.